Welcome to the Mother of All Talkshows. I'm Christopher Helali, filling in for the one and only, the almighty George Galloway. Tonight we have a lot to cover, and there's a lot of things going on around the world which I hope to help lead you all into understanding and through. First, we're going to talk about what's going on in the Middle East, especially the ongoing Israeli genocidal war in Gaza, in South Lebanon, the ongoing hostilities and wars of aggression against the Islamic Republic of Iran. We'll be taking a look at what's going on in Eastern Europe, a surprise visit by the CIA director in Moscow, and we'll be taking a look at what's going on in the United States, especially as the midterm elections approach. We'll be joined tonight by veteran CIA analyst Larry Johnson, by political analyst and journalist and host of Legitimate Targets Jackson Hinkle, and by the famed RT journalist Steve Sweeney, who is the RT bureau chief in Lebanon. We have a great show for you all. It's a pleasure to have this opportunity to host this show for the first time. Stay tuned. We have a lot coming up on tonight's show. So we're starting tonight with some surprising news over the past few days. We heard yesterday that a C-17 from the United States Air Force made a surprise landing in Moscow. Many were curious and wondering what was going on. What we later found out was that a motorcade was spotted in and around Moscow, which entered the Kremlin area. And of course, it was holding none other than CIA Director John Ratcliffe. A lot of media has been buzzing about the visit. Many have now indicated that it was due to stalled talks on Ukraine. Others have said that it was about a message being delivered on behalf of the US administration to President Putin and to the colleague of the CIA director, the head of the SVR. Now, what we know is that clearly the situation is extremely tense, to say the least. The ongoing war in Ukraine, the ongoing NATO aggression, and that's how we have to characterize it. The US-EU-NATO war on the Russian Federation is certainly heating up. We've seen that the Ukrainian government has been targeting civilian infrastructure and civilian industries all throughout the Russian Federation, not only the Donbass, but far afield, as far away as past the Urals. We've seen attacks on Wildberry logistics centers and warehouses. We've seen attacks on bridges. And most egregiously, we've seen war crimes committed against civilians throughout the Russian Federation. So that all to say that we are seeing that the special military operation on the side of Russia and the war of aggression on the side of the Ukrainian regime is picking up steam. And so many are trying to run for a diplomatic solution where there probably is not one left and one available at this point. Clearly because the Ukrainian government is uninterested in any sort of peaceful dialogue and is interested in continuing its assault against the Russian Federation. We're seeing nightly raids by drones on Moscow and many other major cities, but the Russian Federation's air defense units and their drone units are doing a stellar job in keeping the Ukrainian drones away from many of the city centers and from inflicting massive harm along the lines of the civilian population, especially in some key areas. We've seen over the past weeks increased attacks, and we've seen that the Russian president has said that clearly there needs to be justice served for these ongoing attacks and aggression. And we've seen the nightly raids by the Russian armed forces on Kiev and on many other centers, especially shutting down the port in Odessa and attacks on military industrial facilities throughout the parts of Ukraine still under the control of the Ukrainian government. We've also seen attacks against logistics centers, which supply drones and other armaments to the front. So all in all, the war in Eastern Europe is heating up. At the same time, the aggression is heating up in the Middle East. We've seen the ongoing hostilities in the south of Lebanon, which many people are not speaking about. And I'm very excited that Steve Sweeney, RT journalist and bureau chief in Lebanon, will be joining us tonight to break down exactly what's going on in Lebanon. Lebanon is experiencing a tremendous amount of devastation and bombardment by the Israeli regime. We've seen that it has experienced the largest ethnic cleansing since the Nakba, with over 1.2 to 1.3 million people displaced from the south of Lebanon. Many of the border villages, and some of which are well known, including Hula, have been absolutely decimated, with 70+% of their homes and infrastructure completely destroyed, not by chance, but on purpose, blown up by explosives that have been detonated by the Israeli occupation. We've seen that even though there is a ceasefire that has been agreed upon, that there are daily artillery strikes and aerial strikes that take place in the south of Lebanon. I had the opportunity to join Steve and fellow RT journalist and his cameraman, Ali Rida Sabaidi, to Nabatea and to Sor, also known as Tyre, in the south of Lebanon, to show exactly what's going on. And we saw attacks that were taking place, especially in the villages outside of Sor, Mansouri, and others on the border. We saw almost 20, 30-minute gaps between artillery strikes. So there's a lot of things happening in the south that are not being spoken about as the Lebanese government continues to make amends and continues to pursue a policy of capitulation with the Israeli aggressors. It is a very big betrayal of the Lebanese people and the Lebanese state. It's a clear violation of Lebanese sovereignty. So we're going to be speaking more about that tonight. And it's a very important story. We're seeing ongoing strikes in Gaza while there is supposed to be a ceasefire in place. There's currently a mission that is being geared up, a peacekeeping mission by numerous countries to send forces to Gaza, some of which are, of course, allies and signatories of the Abraham Accords. So there's a lot going on there. Still, there are killings every week, entire families being annihilated by the Israeli occupation, and really what is an ongoing genocidal war, as has been said by numerous NGOs and international legal institutions. So that to say that those two areas, which have been included in various memorandum and agreements between the Iranians and the Americans, are hotspots that need to be solved and need to be at peace before there can be peace with Iran. And clearly, the Trump administration is very frustrated with what is going on in Iran. Clearly, we're seeing that President Donald Trump has limited options available and has in fact cornered himself and has really no way out. The only options left are to increase hostility and to pursue what is now being pursued, a form of economic warfare that, according to the American administration, has never been seen before in the history of the world. Of course, Iran has survived 47 years of brutal US sanctions and has many mechanisms to try to absorb a lot of the shocks, the economic shocks and hardships that are being inflicted upon the Iranian people. But it is clear that the Trump administration does not want to admit defeat, even though many of their bases and resources in the region have been obliterated by the Iranian armed forces. The Strait of Hormuz is still under the control of the IRGC Navy, even though the Trump administration and President Trump himself on social media says almost daily that the Strait of Hormuz is open for business and under US control, going so far as to say that the Strait of Hormuz will be soon American territory. The absolute insanity of the president could not be any more clear and apparent for everyone in the world to see. What we're also seeing, of course, is ongoing strikes by the Yemeni armed forces against the forces from the southern part of Yemen, who are allied with Saudi Arabia, who are themselves positioning for an attack on the Sana'a revolutionary government, Ansar Allah. So we're seeing a lot of action happening in the region. And of course, we're seeing really very limited solutions for the United States and for the Israeli regime to try to figure out how to solve the issues. And it comes on the heel of elections this fall in Israel and the midterm elections in November in the United States. Of course, to add to the misery is the ongoing concern over the export of petroleum from the Strait of Hormuz. We're seeing that the US is at critical levels in terms of their petroleum reserve stockpile, somewhere in the vicinity of around 43 to 44 million barrels left in the strategic reserve. That's the lowest it has ever been, according to some of the graphs and charts that have been floating around the internet. And it gives about 40 to 50 days left of the strategic reserve before the United States is fully depleted of its strategic petroleum. That is going to add a big economic hardship to the American population. Gas prices are between $4 to $6 a gallon in the United States, and many are feeling the pressure economically. Many are calling for an end to this war, which, of course, is a violation of President Trump's campaign promises, of which he advocated no new wars, no endless wars, and getting the U.S. out of foreign quagmires. Clearly, the U.S. has gotten itself in a quagmire that it itself cannot unfold itself from the pretzel that it's put itself into. And that's a real concern for American citizens who are themselves feeling the pain in their pocketbooks and wallets. This economic pressure will have an enormous impact on the upcoming midterm elections. We're going to talk more about that with our guest, Jackson Hinkle, who is an American political commentator, a journalist, host of Legitimate Targets, and also now the International Secretary of the American Communist Party. Clearly, there's a lot of change headed for the United States, and it remains to be seen what sort of major impact this will have. Likewise, we're seeing that the elections upcoming in Israel will also have enormous ramifications, not necessarily for the region, because we well know that Israeli foreign policy is the same across all administrations and across the entire political spectrum. But what it will mean for Netanyahu and Sarah and the rest of the family is very, very interesting. And everyone's watching keenly to see what is going to happen. Are they going to go to prison? Are they going to be charged fully through the court system? Or is justice once again not going to be served and they're going to get away scot-free from the claims of corruption? The great Tucker Carlson has released a phenomenal documentary about the ongoing corruption in the Netanyahu family and the ongoing trial that is happening in Israel. I would urge everybody to watch the film, at least to see what's going on personally with the Netanyahus vis-a-vis the Israeli legal system. But it's clear that Israel, as an apartheid state, as a genocidal state, cannot enact justice. It cannot even have justice for its own citizens, never mind for the Palestinians who live under this apartheid and genocidal system and who have been suffering since the Nakba. So I think that many, while they demand justice, will, I think, be unfortunately not granted that level of justice due to the power that the Netanyahus have and the ruling class has in Israel. So all of this is happening this fall. We are in for a really big few weeks and months ahead. And I think that there are going to be long-lasting ramifications, not only for Southwest Asia and the region, but for the globe. We're also seeing latest reports that Iran has entered into some level of strategic cooperation with the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, signing a sort of preliminary agreement on a defense pact. This is also big news coming on the heels of the so-called Mecca agreement, the Mecca pact that includes Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan. So a lot is happening regionally that we are paying attention to. If we travel to the United States and to the Americas, we're seeing the ongoing hostilities against Cuba. And Cuba just celebrated the 100-year, the centenary of Fidel Castro's life. But we're seeing ongoing hybrid warfare against the Cuban people and the Cuban government. We're seeing that the United States is ramping up its rhetoric and has released a paper in the past weeks declaring many of the Cuban entities and even some individuals involved with peace organizations and peace foundations to be under sanctions. So much for friendly neighbors. The United States has criminalized any sort of peace and solidarity with Cuba and has in the crosshairs the Democratic Socialists of America, Code Pink, and many other organizations, and I would argue even the American Communist Party, for their ongoing work with Cuba and their solidarity with the Cuban people. So There's a lot happening also in the Americas. We've seen what's happening in Venezuela after the illegal kidnapping of President Maduro and his wife. Also, the re-incarceration of Alex Saab, of which many of us campaigned for many years to have him freed. We're seeing that the government of Delcy Rodriguez is sadly cooperating with Israeli defense forces that are on the ground, Israeli humanitarian forces that have come to under the guise of humanitarian aid and support, but have begun the process of normalization. And we've seen that neighboring Colombia has very rapidly expanded its ties with the Israeli regime after the loss of the election by the opposition and the ending of the term of Gustavo Petro. So there's a lot happening also in the Americas that we have to understand. And we are going to be keenly watching, especially as the developments unfold throughout the region. Likewise, in China, we have a lot of developments as well. Of course, China has said unequivocally that any new sanctions and any new secondary sanctions that are placed on it for its deals and economic trade with Iran, especially in regarding petroleum, will not be tolerated. Already, China has said openly over the past year or so that they do not agree with the sanctions that have been put on Iran, that they violate the United Nations, that they are not in line with the United Nations Security Council resolutions, and that they're a violation of international law. So it's clear that China and many other powerful countries, especially in the developing multipolar world, will be uneasy to follow the US sanctions if they are placed on Iran as part of this maximalist tactic that the Trump administration is now ratcheting up. And Scott Bessent, the US Secretary of the Treasury, is now touting as the major weapon that the US has up its sleeve. So there's a lot happening on that front. Also, we have to look at what is going on vis-a-vis the European Union. We're seeing a lot of big transformations happening within. We've seen different scandals that have now appeared. And the European Union seems to be deepening its support for Ukraine, while the populations throughout the European Union member states do not want to deepen any of their involvement in Ukraine. And in fact, are economically suffering, especially the populations in Germany and in other Central European countries that have been hit hard by the loss of natural gas and other commodities from the Russian Federation. Another area and a hotspot that we have to consider and take a look at in the Eastern Mediterranean, we've seen that Greece and Cyprus are deepening their ties with the Israeli regime, and that in fact this is part of the ongoing efforts to try to possibly curb Turkey's influence, even though Turkey plays a double game, on one side speaking in defense of the Palestinian people, and on the other cooperating with the Israeli regime by allowing for the flow of petroleum products through the pipelines, through Turkey itself, and having major industrial and business relations with the Israeli regime. So there's a lot that needs to be unpacked in the region, and I hope to do so with some of the guests tonight. Lastly, we have major developments in Syria. We're watching very closely that the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, have now disbanded. We saw Mazlum Abdi, the leader of the SDF, sign an agreement next to Jolani, President al-Shara of Syria, the al-Qaeda leader turned so-called president. And we've seen the reintegration of the Kurdish-led forces in the northeast into the Syrian army now. And this is a very big development. It's a bookend. It's the end of the so-called Rojava revolution, the Rojava dream that was touted so much in the West. I fought in the northeast in Syria, and I saw firsthand what the United States and others were doing. Sadly, the Kurds chose the wrong side. They chose against Russia and the government of Bashar al-Assad. They chose the Americans, and now the Americans have served them on a silver platter to al-Shara and to the Turkish authorities. And therefore, you've seen major developments taking place, including an ongoing peace deal that is unfolding in Turkey with the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK. And we've seen very bizarre political alignments, including the far-right Turkish nationalists under Bahçeli, basically touting Öcalan, Abdullah Öcalan, the leader of the PKK, who's imprisoned on the island of Imrali, and speaking about peace and speaking about the freeing of Öcalan. These are things that would have been unthinkable just 5 or so years ago, but they are in fact the reality now, and we're seeing a constantly transforming region in front of us. So we're going to talk about all of these. I hope that our guests will provide you all with a good analysis and understanding of the topics before us. And I hope that together we can really unpack many of these issues and many more that are emerging throughout the world as the world enters into a profound change and transformation. I'm going to take a quick break now, but don't go anywhere, because we'll be speaking to Larry Johnson, former CIA analyst, after the break. Stay tuned.
He's a schoolyard bully, Piers Morgan. And he does have a big show, but then he has a big and plush and very well appointed studio. And he has a big and very well paid staff. He has a very big budget. He's an extremely wealthy man. And the combination of all of that does give you a certain head start. We, on the other hand, are a mom and pop business. There's just me and Gayatri. And the people who told me the phones are melting are my own grandchildren who are answering the phones for nothing. This is an unpaid gig I'm doing and do twice a week. Nobody pays me one brass farthing to make this show, to present this show. I'm not sure that Piers Morgan would tell you how much he makes.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talkshows with George Galloway.
This is the Mother of All Talkshows. I'm Christopher Helali, standing in for George Galloway tonight, who has the night off, and well deserved. Now, tonight's poll is, should Tucker Carlson be U.S. president? We put it out to all of you. You can vote on George's Telegram, X, YouTube, and Patreon. Let's take a look at some of the numbers so far. On Telegram, we have 76 yes, 24 no. We've got on X 73 yes, 27 no. On YouTube, we have 57 yes, 43 no. On the YouTube stream, 71 yes, 29 no. And on the Patreon, we have 75 yes, 25 no. So resounding voice for Tucker Carlson to run for U.S. president. I know that George Galloway is a big fan of the idea, and I think that it would certainly upend some of the U.S. status quo. Let's see if Tucker will eventually agree and throw his hat into the ring. If you want to call the show, it's toll-free in the United States and Canada. Call 1-855-506-6287. It's also free in the United Kingdom and Ireland. +44 800 2294 411. And the worldwide number is 0044 203 966 2625. Looking forward to all of your calls. Now it's time to speak to our first guest, a dear friend of mine, CIA veteran and founder of BERG Associates. It's Larry Johnson. Welcome, Larry, to the Mother of All Talkshows.
Man, I was going to say, George, you're looking so much younger with that dark beard. And then, oh, it's Chris.
No, George is much more handsome than I am. That's the truth.
Well,
good to see you, Larry.
Yeah, good to be with you, man.
Good to be with you.
So what are we going to talk about?
Anything
going on in the world?
I don't know. You tell me. What do you see happening in the world today?
Well, we've got economic D-Day now. I think initially people were inclined to think that referred to Decision Day or some sort of action, but it actually is turning out to be a dud because the United States is trying to pressure Iran economically, and Iran has essentially disconnected itself from the U.S. dollar-controlled economic system. And, and you've been there as well. And, we have, I think, a mutual friend, Suleiman Ahmed. And, I asked Suleiman, I said, do you have trouble getting food? He said, trouble getting food in Iran? He said, I had problems to stop eating. He said, I put on weight. People are always giving you stuff. Talking to another podcaster, Nima Al-Rashid. Nima had been away from Iran for 12 years, and he went back in January. And I said, hey, look, what did you notice? What was the difference between the economy when you were last there in, say, 2014 and today? And he said, it's a night and day difference. I said, has night fallen or is it bright daylight? He goes, oh, no, it's great. He says, this is a dramatic improvement. And so here's the United States trying to apply dollar-based economic sanctions on Iran, who's doing its transactions outside of the dollar. And it's not just that it's a different currency, it's a whole different system. Think of it as like the Western rail gauges, and then you get into Russia, and you got wider rail gauges. One train can't run on the other track. You have to have specifically designed trains for each track. It's the same now with the international financial system that China is setting up along with Russia under BRICS. And China's system called CIPS, Cross-Border Interbank Payment System, completely different way of getting paid. And it's outside of the purview of the dollar. So here's Besant trying to put economic pressure on Iran, and Iran today is actually in a stronger position economically than it has been, say, compared to 12 years ago.
Absolutely, you're spot on. I was with Suleiman Ahmed in Iran, and it's true. We had tons of food, tons of options. Everything was working. I was so surprised because if you really listen to the media, the Western media, you'd think that people were starving. You remember what they said about other places around the world, including Venezuela? They're eating corpses. They're doing all sorts of things. Everybody's diving into trash cans. No way in Iran. There's so much food, so much hospitality. It was really surprising. Certainly, there is a little bit of inflation, but it's being mitigated by the fact that a lot of things are affordable to people, especially food items. So they're able to survive and they're able to thrive even with these economic sanctions. Let me ask you, what do you see happening with petroleum, with shipping, with logistics? Because you and I were talking about this just about I think a week or 2 weeks ago on another podcast with Cyrus Jensen and with Alex Reportify. Let me ask you, what are you analyzing? What's happening in the markets? What's to come for the strategic petroleum reserve in the U.S.?
This is where people make a mistake, that they equate oil, or they deal with oil as one entity, and you gotta drill beneath the surface to find out what kind of oil are we talking about, because all oil is not created equal. And the kind of oil that came out of the Persian Gulf until the cutoff that started around February 28th was what's called sour crude. It's high in sulfur, has a high sulfur content. Now, most people expected that when they closed the Strait of Hormuz, that meant immediate cessation in the flow of oil, and it didn't, because, and I've described it, there are three phases we've gone through. Phase one, which lasted from 28 February to 5 April, roughly, plus or minus 4 or 5 days. During that period, there were already tankers that had been filled up with oil in the Persian Gulf They were already on the high seas headed to their destination. But in some cases, it took them almost 40 days to get there. So the world wasn't experiencing in that first 40 days of the war a shortage of oil. It was a potential future shortage of oil. Then when April 5th hits, then now there is a potential shortage. So what the United States did and a lot of other countries, Japan, South Korea, they all had petroleum reserves. So they began drawing on those reserves, and I've likened it to think that you're making $10,000 a month doing your job, and you've been salting money away in a savings account, so you now got $60,000 in savings. You're laid off. You no longer have that income, but you got that savings account, so you just start drawing $10,000 a month off of that. It's good for the first 5 months until you get to month 6, and all of a sudden, I take this $10,000 out, I'm out. That's what we've done to the petroleum reserve, because that petroleum reserve is made up of about 30 to 40% sweet crude and 60% sour crude. And it's not just a matter that you can draw it down to zero, because right now there's about 140 million barrels of sour crude left in the storage in those caverns. But the real amount available is only 70, half that. That other half has to stay in those caverns, or if they draw it out, because the way you draw it out, you pump water in, it raises the oil up to the surface. That water is going to dissolve the salt caverns, and they will collapse. So now we're at the end of phase 2. We're out of the petroleum reserve. Now we got to deal with the actual shortage, and there's the problem. There is a global shortage of diesel and aviation fuel. In fact, we had 2 days ago the report out of Buffalo, New York. They ran out of aviation fuel. The U.S. refineries are going to be shy of about 300,000 barrels per day of oil from Canada, which again is critical to making diesel and aviation fuel. Canadians say it's being cut back because of maintenance, but it represents almost 8% of the U.S. total supply of oil, and within the whole realm of sulfur, high sulfur oil, I think the actual percentage is much higher. So you got this global shortage right now that's starting to impact, and it's not going away anytime soon. It's going to be with us for at least the rest of this year.
Yeah, I think it's a big complicating factor for the Trump administration come the midterm elections, because we're seeing gas prices. You're in the U.S. right now. I'm thinking they're somewhere in the vicinity, from what I've heard, $4 to $6 a gallon. How are Americans dealing with that economic pain and really that hit to their wallets and their pocketbooks?
Now, the gasoline side is not, it's up compared to, say, before the war, but the real impact is on the diesel side. Diesel is up over $2.30 a gallon from what it was previously. And it varies by region, but right now on the West Coast, California, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, up to Alaska, they're paying over $6 a gallon for diesel. The price used to be well below $3. So, and how does that affect? Well, it has an effect on farmers. Anybody that's harvesting using diesel harvesters, diesel tractors, their cost of farming has gone up, substantially. You're talking about a price increase of around 35 to 40%. Then you've got the transportation costs of food getting to market, raw materials being hauled from one point to another. Again, the cost of those raw materials goes up. The cost of food goes up. And so then people are having to spend more money and to buy less. So, it's starting to hit the U.S. economy, and the trajectory is this is only going to get worse over the next 10 weeks.
Let me ask you, let's pivot now to, I think, what you and I are watching very closely, the ongoing war in Eastern Europe. We've seen the Ukrainian regime launching more aggressive strikes against civilian infrastructure and civilian centers in the Russian Federation. We've seen Russia's response increasing day by day. What's going on the ground there, and how do you assess what's going on in the special military operation or the US, EU, NATO war on the Russian Federation?
Well, without having an official ceremony, I think Russia has moved from special military operation to full-blown war. And I rest that on three elements of their effort. Element one is they have completely blockaded the Black Sea, Odessa, and other ports in Ukraine previously that were receiving Western shipments of military equipment, as well as being ports that wheat and other grains from Ukraine could be hauled out. That's completely shut down now. It's already having an effect on the international grain market. Future prices are way up significantly. So Odessa and warehouses, storage sites, military headquarters, etc., they've been destroyed over the course of the last 6 weeks as Russia has really intensified its attacks. And we're not talking an occasional one. They're doing it every day. So you've got to look at that. Secondly, the attacks inside of Kyiv on warehouses, factories, underground bunkers, storage facilities. There again, Russia has been relentless in its strikes on those targets, has not let up. And then you get to the ground operations where instead of, go back to 2023, Russia was attacking Bakhmut. And then towards the end of 2023 into early 2024, they were attacking Avdiivka. Now they're attacking on 7 different axes in multiple sites all along the front, north to south. So it's really on the point of overwhelming the Ukrainian army. And the Ukrainian army is getting stretched thinner and thinner and thinner. And it's going to break. I think it will break this fall. So what we've seen is, without announcing it as a war, Russia is now more on a war footing as far as what it's doing to Ukraine.
What are you looking at as a timeline? Are you thinking maybe another 6 months, a year, 2 years? How long are we looking, and what's sort of the goal, do you think, to end this once and for all for the Russian Federation?
I think the timeline is far, far shorter than most pundits see this stretching on through into 2027 and possibly beyond. I don't see that. I think it very well could come to a screeching halt this year, simply because got some curious signals from the United States. So we had the mystery visit yesterday of CIA Director Ratcliffe to Moscow. My understanding is he did not meet with Putin. I think he met with his FSB counterpart and SVR counterparts. So he would have met with the intelligence officers, and I think he was there to deliver a message, and a message not so much a warning to Russia, but a message asking Russia to maybe go easy on the United States. That there's something that's happened that inspired Ratcliffe to make this. This was a sudden, unannounced trip, and the fact that he went in on a C-17, a military aircraft, is very, very odd, because the CIA director has his own Gulfstream aircraft that could easily have made that flight. So we don't know what's up with that. But with the United States bailing out on the Independence Day celebrations the other day in Kyiv, I think that was sending a message as well that maybe Ratcliffe is telling the Kremlin, okay, we're out, and evidence that we're out is we didn't go to that, and we're going to stop sharing intelligence, and they're not going to receive any more military equipment. Yeah, possibly that's what was said. That was one of the purposes of the visit, but I don't know beyond that.
It was a surprising visit. I was shocked with the initial video of that C-17 landing in Moscow, and then the motorcade, which looks like it came actually out of the C-17. They had it all prepared. Mm-hmm. So that was quite surprising, to say the least. You know, it was, and then of course everybody's wondering.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. That may have been the reason for the C-17 bring their own. They wanted to make sure they had all the vehicles they needed in order to go from the airport to the Kremlin and back.
Yeah, I think that's why they employed the C-17. But it was, like you said, unannounced. Even Peskov, clearly when he was speaking with reporters, didn't provide a lot of information at first. So it was clear that this was a more sudden turn of events in terms of the visit by CIA Director Ratcliffe. Let me ask you, as we wrap up this segment, let me ask you, what are you looking for in terms of what's happening in Eastern Europe, what's happening in the Middle East, vis-a-vis the United States? What's the Trump administration giving as signals? And why all of a sudden this sudden warm relation and feelings for Kim Jong-un?
Yeah. Well, Kim Jong-un is just an extent. He's like the British monarchy. In other words, look at, he succeeded his father succeeded his father. This is a hereditary monarchy. This is not some communist ideological system. This is pure. This is like England under, King George, then passes it off to his daughter, who then passes it off to her son. This hereditary notion, and I think Trump's sort of keen on that. Passing power off to his kids. Maybe he wants to do that. Look, the U.S. policy is in complete chaos right now. They can't figure there is no strategy. It's been more of trying to extricate himself without creating a disaster. And I see what it looks like. The United States is now disengaging from Ukraine, and then hopefully that was what Ratcliffe was signaling. With Iran, they're caught. The United States wants to control Iran but can't. It wants to open the Strait of Hormuz but can't. And it even if it contemplates returning to military operations, there are supply limitations. There's significant supply limitations on what Washington can actually do. So I think the economic pressures that are on the horizon are going to force Trump to ultimately come back and make a deal with Iran, and that this will get settled diplomatically, not militarily.
Well, we're going to be following it very closely. I think that there's a lot of interesting developments to come, and I think there's a lot more chaos in store if any of the recent history bears out as we suspect. Larry Johnson, veteran CIA analyst and a great friend of mine. A pleasure to have you on the Mother of All Talkshows. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you soon.
All right, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
My pleasure. Take care. So after the break, we're going to be taking your calls. Stay tuned. This is the Mother of All Talkshows.
beautiful call, as always, robust. Terrific characterization of little Macron and the imposter Shah of Los Angeles. He is, of course, an imposter in two ways. He's an imposter in pretending that he has any support from the great mass of the 90 million Iranians who've not seen him since he was 4 years old, when he fled with their riches in the saddlebags, and the father and mother, emperor, empress, Shah, roamed around the world from Monaco to God knows where, spending the millions that they had stolen from the people of Iran. But he's a pretender, an imposter for a second reason. The Pahlavis are not even the royal family of Iran. The royal family of Iran is ancient, millennia, and the rightful emperor or Shah, if there is such a thing as a rightful emperor, rightful Shah, was overthrown by a corporal in the Iranian army, the grandfather of this joker Reza. His grandfather was a corporal, a private soldier in the Iranian army, was raised to the rank of corporal, and then with British backing overthrew the actual monarch. And he had a son who was the infamous Shah of Shahs, the father of Reza. So he's a double imposter.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
Welcome back to our viewers and listeners. This is the Mother of All Talk Shows. I'm Christopher Helali, filling in for George Galloway, who is off for the night, and a well-deserved rest indeed. Our first line tonight, our first call, we have Mustafa calling from California to talk about Tucker Carlson. Welcome to the Mother of All Talk Shows.
Yes, good morning or good afternoon, whichever applies to you. I'm from Mars, and on Mars we have a totally different perspective of how things work or how things are viewed on Earth. Let's take, for example, Tucker Carlson. Most Earthlings view Tucker Carlson, who has a checkered past, by his past. On Mars we have a different theory. We judge a man by his future and a woman by her past. Second, regarding what is happening on Earth, regarding the issue of Make America Great Again. On Mars, we use the same alphabets, but we change the narration. We say, instead of Make America Great Again, we identify it as Make America Go Away. So this is the issue with the Earthlings. They are focused on Donald Trump, and we view what is happening on Earth as a circus, and Donald Trump is the clown.
Well, it's a very interesting point indeed. Let me ask you, what do you think from your perspective? Let's say from the, are you from the Mars perspective or the Earth perspective?
I am a Shia Muslim.
Okay, well, you know, Ya Ali, Ya
I've
Hussein.
served in the US Army.
We can agree on that.
I've served in the
Where have you served?
I've served in the U.S. Army. I'm a retired veteran with an honorable discharge. I've lived in the United States almost 40 years, and I'm very patriotic, and I love the country. There's a difference between the leaders and the people. Americans are great people. The leaders, in fact, most of whom were lawyers, are the most corrupt. And since Eisenhower, America has never had a leader that we can say has any good quality.
I think you're spot on, and of course we've seen that even leaders like the late Ayatollah Khamenei said that he was against the American government, but not the American people. The American people are good people. Even Hassan Nasrallah said the same. So we've seen that this is obviously the Epstein class, the Epstein regime that is conducting these wars, conducting these brutalities, the pedophilia, the cannibalism, you name it, and the genocides that are happening in Gaza, in South Lebanon, and beyond. But the American people are different. You're absolutely right, and that has been said by many. So I think that you raise a good point, and I thank you again for calling in and wishing you a wonderful evening. Thank you again, Mustafa from California. Now I want to thank the Mother of All Talk Show donors. A big thank you to some of tonight's top MOTS supporters. Keith Horsfall, Alexander Visram, Gerard McGarry, Chinid Beg, and John Cullen. Your support through moats.tv is greatly appreciated and helps keep the program on air. I know George thanks you all from the bottom of his heart. To support the show, visit moats.tv and click the Donate Now button. You can give whatever you can afford in any currency. One-off donations are more than welcome, and recurring support helps keep Moats going week after week. I know that George is one of the most prominent and independent voices. Let's keep him on the air. Next on the phones, we have Graham from Jersey speaking about targeted assassinations. Graham, welcome to the Mother of All Talk Shows.
Dr. Helali, assalamu alaikum. كيف حالك؟ أنت بخير؟
وعليكم السلام brother. وعليكم السلام brother.
أنا أتكلم لغة عربية بطلاقة رائعة. Anyway, let's talk in English now. It's nice to meet you, Doctor.
It's a
Doctor,
pleasure.
I would like to talk to you about a very brave and courageous British cancer surgeon from Oxford by the name of Professor Nick Maynard. Now, he recently appeared on the Tucker Carlson show and visibly shocked the presenter with his graphic accounts of what he experienced over a 15-year period at the Al-Shifa and Nasser hospitals in Gaza. What he said is a revelation of the suffering endured by Palestinians in Gaza. Dr. Maynard spoke of one particular period in the hospital. Here I shall have to paraphrase so that I may clearly present an honest account of Dr. Maynard's experience. He said that at the beginning of a particular week, several very young Palestinian boys were brought into the hospital with bullet wounds to the head. The next day, more teenagers had to be treated with bullet wounds to the heart and the lungs. The following day, more teenagers were treated with bullet wounds to the abdomen and the legs. And then finally, at the end of the week, more teenagers were admitted with bullet wounds to their testicles. Dr. Maynard stated quite clearly that all these injuries were the result of targeted assassination attempts. All the young victims were unarmed and simply queuing at a food distribution center for their families. The Israeli military also entered the hospital of this particular surgeon and destroyed all the medical cables leading to the operating tables where Dr. Maynard carried out his surgery, invariably without anesthetics, because these anesthetics were confiscated by the military. Now, recently, the Israeli Minister of National Security, Ben-Gvir, said the following: I think targeted assassinations should be carried out in Gaza, taking down 30 to 40 people every night. These people should not live. They are not even people. Now, with people like Netanyahu, a wanted international terrorist, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, we now have a government which can be described as a fully fledged fascist entity. Anyway, Mr. Doctor, full credit to a former Israeli soldier who absconded from his regiment and now lives permanently in the United States and has refused to return to Israel. His name is Shariel Ben Ephraim, who was disgusted when he found out that naked male Palestinian prisoners were being raped by Alsatian dogs. Doctor, my heart goes out to the good and kind Jewish people worldwide who resent what this apartheid government is carrying out in their name. They are united as one faith and have stated categorically that Judaism has no connection to Zionism. Thank you very much, Dr. Healy. Shukran jazilan, ya Sadiqi. Shukran.
Shukran jazilan, Habibi. Graham, thank you so much for calling. Thank you so much for your precious words and for your very important information that you are giving to our viewers and listeners tonight. I hope everybody checks out that interview. I had the great honor of meeting Dr. Mads Gilbert almost over a decade ago now at MIT when he came to give a lecture and heard firsthand accounts long before it became fashionable by some to support the Palestinian cause. It was, of course, those of us in the trenches at a time when few were talking about Palestine. And he spoke of the harrowing accounts during some of the operations that happened prior to the most recent genocidal war launched by the Zionist regime. So thank you very much indeed. I hope everybody follows all of the great medical professionals and journalists who are bringing us all the information and carrying out the enormous task of saving lives in Gaza, in the other occupied Palestinian territories and beyond. Thank you again, Graham. Don't forget, you can scan the QR code now and leave a comment on the YouTube stream. Keep it clean, and we'll read it out on air. #Moats. We have one from Fahim Share 3079. Great guest presenter. Respect to Chris for a great show. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. We have Kuplex 1. Tucker is too smart to become president. Phil 342. I like Tucker, but not sure he is presidential material, and the mob would do him in. We have Toasted Heretic 72. Carlson certainly did not have a quote-unquote road to Damascus moment. He just saw which way the wind was blowing. I wouldn't trust Carlson with your future. Never mind my. Anna Ringwald 8925. Tucker, question mark. He would flip to a neocon in a millisecond, like everyone else. One cannot get near the levers of power without passing Bibi's purity test. And ipso facto 1966. If Tucker becomes president, he will suffer the same fate as JFK. Let's see our poll update here on whether Tucker Carlson should be U.S. president. We have on Telegram, 76% yes, 24% no. We have on X, 71% yes, 29% no. On the YouTube com, 57 yes, 43 no. YouTube stream, 71% yes, 29% no. And Patreon, 75% yes, 25% no. Now headed to a break, but up next, we have the one and only, my very dear friend and brother, Steve Sweeney, war correspondent, commentator, filmmaker, RT journalist, and RT bureau chief in Lebanon. Stay tuned.
Thank you. Go ahead.
During your show in the past, you've often mentioned that Donald Trump would be a much better alternative than Biden, although you weren't a big fan of him, etc. And you said that in all likeliness, if he gets in power, he'll be much more appeasing towards Putin. There'll be less likely of the conflict to escalate. But I have to tell you, I'm not so sure about that. Really, I think the only way to solve all this, it doesn't matter if Kenny gets in or anyone else, because there's always going to be, at one stage of our lifetime, two psychotic leaders of the superpowers. Why hasn't anyone in your show or yourself mentioned anything about nuclear disarmament or CND? Surely the only way to save humanity is by nuclear disarmament. And I just wanted to see what you thought about that.
Yeah, well, of course, but how are you going to get that? I mean, does CND even still exist? They could have been leafleting outside every cinema showing Oppenheimer. But of course, they don't have enough people to fill a telephone box. It is the worst example I know of, although the Stop the War Coalition runs it close, of an organization that for its sectarian, internal, political reasons has thrown away its brand. I have not appeared on a Stop the War platform for an entire decade. Not to worry, no to NATO, no to war. Its rival organization attracts exponentially larger numbers of people. They cannot help themselves, these people. These members of leftist groupuscles have it in their DNA that they cannot get along with anybody who isn't exactly like them. And as the number of people who are exactly like them is mercifully tiny, they end up in tiny organizations. So, of course, I'm in favor of the destruction of nuclear weapons. But how are you going to get that? It's a totally utopian slogan to advance at this point in time. I'm just trying to stop the weapons from being used.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
Welcome back to the Mother of All Talk Shows. This is Christopher Helali, filling in for the one and only, the great George Galloway, who has the night off. Joining us now is my dear friend and brother, my colleague, Steve Sweeney, filmmaker, commentator, and war correspondent, joining us live from Lebanon. Welcome, Steve.
It's good to see you again, Chris. Not so long ago that you were here. The place that I am now.
Good to see you. Good to see you. I missed that bookshelf. I missed that couch. Good to see you. Welcome to the show. Let's start off. Can you bring us up to date? What's going on in Lebanon? What's going on in the south of Lebanon? Kind of give our viewers and listeners an idea, because there's been a real media blockade around the information of what's going on in Lebanon. Take us on the ground as to what's happening in Lebanon.
Well, I'll start, Chris, if I can, by talking about what happened today. And some of the work that we've been concentrating on now is the killing of civilians. Obviously now, if you take the period from October 2023 until now, the figures say that nearly 9,000 civilians, 9,000 people have been killed in Israeli strikes. Now, we've been focusing really on the children that have been killed in that period. So the total as of today, and this is a total sadly that is going to rise, is 761 children that have been killed by Israel since 2023. Now, if you take that as a percentage, 9.1% of all of the people that have been killed by Israel since October 2023 are children. That's 1 in 11 of all of those killed are children, those under the age of 18 years old. Now, today we were in a southern village called Arab Salem, and we met with a man whose entire family, or almost his entire family, were wiped out in an Israeli strike back in April. Now, that included his 2 youngest children. His oldest child was only saved because his mother smothered him to shield him from the Israeli missile. He was under the rubble for 30 minutes. His mother lay dead beside him. His siblings lay dead beside him. His grandparents, his aunties lay dead beside him. And he was eventually pulled out of the rubble, obviously incredibly traumatized. Now, we can look again, just a week or so ago, 4 children were killed in a massacre in Ansar. They went with their family for a day out by the sea, at a resort, and it ended up with their bodies being pulled out of a swimming pool. We can talk about Nabatea, where the leader of the paramedic unit there responded to an emergency call, only to find that the victim was his own son, Jude, a teenage boy who was killed riding a motorcycle, and as we understand, delivering humanitarian aid to people that were caught in Nabatea during the intensity of the bombardment there. We can talk about Khadija Atwi, who we were there when she was killed. Khadija Atwi was a teenage girl. She was shot in the face by the IDF. She was holding her 5-month-old nephew at the time. And what Israel then did was that they opened fire on the paramedics, on the health workers that were trying to reach her body, trying to rescue her. We filmed them as they were returning from the scene. They were health workers were treating their colleagues for bullet wounds. They then opened fire on a group of journalists. We were part of that group of journalists who were there reporting on what had happened. This was in February 2025, the day when the villagers from the south were due to return to their own land, to their homes that had been under occupation by the Israelis. Many of those places are currently under occupation again. Her body lay there for more than 24 hours. This is in Uhula. This is a village very close to the border of occupied Palestine. It required intervention from the United Nations, in order to be able to recover her, very sadly, by that stage, dead body, which tells you a lot, really, about Lebanon's control over its own sovereign territory. So this is something that we've been working on today. Now, the situation here at the moment, Israel is occupying around 6 kilometers inside Lebanese sovereign territory. Around 65 towns and villages remain inside that. Now, the Israeli Defense Minister, Israel Katz, has said something around 24 of those villages have been destroyed completely. We've looked at satellite images, and of course we've been on the ground in those areas, working inside those areas. And for your viewers, it's very reminiscent of what you're seeing in Gaza. In fact, the Israeli ministers, particularly Ben-Gvir, who's threatened to flatten Dahia, the southern suburbs of Beirut, and Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister, has said that he wants to turn Dahia into Khan Yunis, and they've threatened to destroy what they call frontline villages. But these are more than frontline villages. Of course, these are towns and cities where Lebanese families have lived for generation after generation. And of course, they're described, and the Western media has gone along with this as well, describe them as Hezbollah strongholds, the same terminology that they use to describe Dahia, the southern suburb of Beirut. They describe it as a Hezbollah stronghold. And of course, this choice of language isn't accidental. This is deliberate, and it's essentially dehumanizing the people that live in these areas and justifying the brutal Israeli bombardment. Now, across the south, you have to remember again that there's supposed to be a ceasefire in place. I've lost count of how many ceasefires have been agreed and how many times they've been broken. The last one, I think, was the 5th ceasefire that we've had since November 2024. And it came into effect, I think, around midday. This is going back a few months now. And Israel breached it 3 minutes past the implementation of that ceasefire. So there is no ceasefire. We shouldn't really speak of it in terms of a ceasefire. And now what Israel is doing, we've just heard that one of the villages, Bani Hayyan in southern Lebanon, again, huge detonations of civilian homes in that area. In Hula, again, as the village that I mentioned earlier, in June, the United Nations Peacekeeping Force, UNIFIL, found 4 tons of explosives there. Now, there is an illegal Israeli military base on the outskirts of the village of Hula, and it doesn't take a genius to work out where those canisters they're in like plastic canisters. It doesn't take a genius to work out where they came from. Now, according to sources that were on the ground and saw these canisters, they had Hebrew writing on them. Now, Israel again has been using these kind of canisters very frequently. Just recently, the Beaufort Castle, which actually you saw with us last week, Chris, if you remember, and you could see the Beaufort Castle. This is a Crusader era castle, huge historic importance. It was used again months ago by the Israelis as a bit of a PR stunt. They photographed an Israeli flag on top of the Beaufort Castle to try and make out as though they'd taken control of that area. In fact, it was nothing more than a PR stunt for Netanyahu. It hadn't been placed there by Israeli soldiers, of course. They were unable to reach the Beaufort Castle, and they dropped it via a drone. Now, again, a few weeks ago, Israel used 700 tons of explosives. You imagine 700 tons of explosives in and around that area. Now, this was enough to trigger a seismic event. This was felt as far away as Sidon, which is on the coast of Lebanon. They call it the gateway to the south, but it's quite some distance away. We've seen similar detonations and demolitions in places, for example, Majd al-Zun, which again, the village there has been split in two because of these huge kind of seismic events. So Israel is using this, in a way, this scorched earth policy. Now, to put it into like a global context, of course, this is part of the Greater Israel Project. And this is something that once upon a time we could have said sat on the fringes of Israeli society. But now this has support right at the very top, not just from Smotrich and Ben Gvir, the far-right extremists, but also from the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, this runs through the core of Israel's very existence, really, and it's always been a colonialist, expansionist, Anglo-American proxy in this region, and it's always sought to expand and steal land, whether it's from the Palestinians. Of course, as we know, the state of Israel was built on Palestinian land, which is why we call it occupied Palestine, but it's also has its goal of extending into Lebanon, taking whole sways up to the Litani River. This is some, I think, 40 kilometers from the so-called border with occupied Palestine. And we're seeing this again also in Syria. Parts of Syria they see as this, as part of the Greater Israel project. Parts of Egypt, even parts of Turkey are included in this. So this is the threat that is posed by Israel. Now, again, battle-wise on the battlefront, much of that is being concentrated around Ali Tahrir Hill. This is again, as you saw last week, this is just across on the same ridgeline as the Beaufort Castle. But this is where they believe that Hezbollah has extensive tunnel networks, that Hezbollah fighters are in those tunnels, and it's making a real push to take control of this because they think it would give them a strategic advantage because of its elevation. It gives you like a view of pretty much the rest of South Lebanon. So it's really focusing on that at the moment. As we were there last week, you recall that we heard artillery fire in that area, and we're seeing a lot of airstrikes and again detonations, but they're not able to take control of it because of the fierce resistance that is being mounted by Hezbollah in that area. It doesn't look very likely that they're going to be able to take strategic control of that. Now, you have to bear in mind the Israeli elections are not too far away, and if we believe some of the polls, they're suggesting that Netanyahu may lose that those elections. The polls suggest that he's 6 points adrift at this stage. So Israel is looking as a real push to promote some kind of victory. for Netanyahu, this kind of PR victory to say, look, now isn't the time for change. We are making progress. We're making these advances in southern Lebanon. We've taken Ali Tahrir Hill, which they think might give him a boost. But as we spoke to one Hezbollah MP last week, he said, look, if they take Ali Tahrir Hill, if it falls, it won't be either the defeat or the victory that Israel will portray it as. Hezbollah is entrenched in areas across the south. It has these defensive lines, and it's causing Israel some very, very big problems, as we know. Now, Israel is only able to occupy the land that it currently occupies because of, and I'll describe it in the terms that the Lebanese people have used when they speak to us about it, this humiliating, shameful deal that has been struck due to these talks, the controversial talks between Israel, Lebanon, and the United States, and the tripartite agreement that was signed as a result of that, which there are many causes of concern within that document, the 14 points, but point one is the de facto recognition of the state of Israel. And, this is something that is anathema to the people of this land. It has no popular support in the country. It doesn't even have popular support within the government itself. The only supporters of this framework agreement really are a very, very narrow group, because it serves their self-interest, and that narrow group is also supportive or softer on Israel. So this agreement is tied up with the disarmament of Hezbollah. That's what permeates throughout the whole of this document. And according to the agreement, the Israelis will not leave southern Lebanon until Hezbollah is disarmed. So that's the one of the core issues, because Hezbollah is not going to disarm. The organization itself says it's not going to disarm. There is no force on the ground in Lebanon that is capable of disarming Hezbollah by force, even if they wanted to, which of course they don't. They don't want to see the disarmament of Hezbollah, because they see them as the only organization that is able to defend the country, to defend Lebanese sovereignty against the Israeli occupiers. Now, that's kind of, in a nutshell, the situation on the ground right now. And, the bombing is continuing, heavily targeted, many villages across the south. And we have to say that what they're hitting are not Hezbollah positions. They're hitting civilian buildings. They're bulldozing civilian buildings. They're trying to make the land unlivable. Now, we've been on the ground for the best part of 2 years now, and we've documented the use, for example, of glyphosate to destroy agricultural land. We've seen the airstrikes, again, the burning and the torching, and now I think even the Western media is playing catch up, and they're now realizing what's happening, and even they're starting to report on the burning of agricultural land. We're talking hectares, thousands of hectares of land, mainly in the south, and of course this is the lifeblood of the economy of southern Lebanon, and of course that has a knock-on effect for the rest of the country. The crops that are grown there, mainly tobacco, of course, is one of the main crops in the south, but also olive trees. Now, the olive groves that we're seeing, what we're seeing now is they're being systematically destroyed. They're either being burnt down, bulldozed, as we've witnessed firsthand. For example, in Blida, one of the border villages, where the olive groves there are older than the state of Israel itself. Now, Israel sent in the day of the olive harvesting season, while we were there, they sent in bulldozers to pull down the olive trees. Now, they're even taking them across the border into occupied Palestine. And as we know, the Israelis themselves are allergic to olive oil and olives, but so maybe it will do some good. We don't know. But this is part of that attempt to break the the people's connection to their land. The olive tree is hugely symbolic. It's symbolic of the people's connection to southern Lebanon. This is a land that has been in their families for generations. Olive groves that have been cultivated by families and their parents, their grandparents, their great grandparents, and you can trace the roots back hundreds and hundreds of years, particularly with these. With the olive trees, thousands of years, in fact. So it's kind of a bit of a piecemeal approach that they're attacking everything to make life completely unsustainable. Israel Katz, the defense minister, said 200,000 people will not be able to return to their land, will never be able to return to their land within the so-called yellow zone, the security zone, as they call it, which again is a term that dehumanizes the people of that land. We're talking now, people have started to go back, but 1.2 million people internally displaced in Lebanon. That's around 20% of the population. Lebanon has a population of less than 6 million people, 1.2 million of those internally displaced. And we describe it as the biggest ethnic cleansing operation. In fact, an ethnic cleansing operation on a scale far larger even than the Nakba. So this is predominantly targeting the Shia community. And we shouldn't shy away from saying that, because the Israelis certainly don't. They, with the language that we've heard from the likes of Netanyahu, from the likes of Israel Katz, from the likes of Ben Gvir, genocidal language that they're using, describing the Shia community here as the enemy within, painting every single member of the Shia community as a terrorist that really deserves to be driven from their land. Now, in tandem with this, because of course, Israel, Hassan Nasrallah, Said Hassan Nasrallah, the former Secretary General of Hezbollah, well, he described Israel as weaker than a spider's web. This is in a famous speech that he gave after the victory in the 2006 war. He gave this speech in Bint Jbeil, again, a town that has been completely destroyed now by the Israelis. But of course, Israel could not survive without the support of the United States, without the support of the United Kingdom, the two main powers that are behind this colonialist apartheid project, and also we have to say the European Union as well. It wouldn't survive not even a day without their support. So they have a vested interest, and this is where they converge, because Israel talks about the Greater Israel Project. Now, what's also the Americans in particular are talking about, the US envoy Tom Barak. There was a time last year where we saw this flurry of diplomatic activity, where we had the likes of Lindsey Graham, Tom Barak, Morgan Ortagus, and you name it, every American politician under the sun was coming here. Not only were they coming here, but they were coming here to make speeches from the presidential palace. So this tells you again a little bit about who really runs Lebanon, because they were making speeches. Tom Barak said, he spoke about the Trump economic zone. And under the Trump economic zone is exactly the same as the so-called yellow line, the security zone. And under that plan, of course, the plans that we've heard before, the plans that we heard in the 1980s, promises of huge investment. There'll be roads, there'll be jobs, there'll be prosperity. And all you have to do is sign up to it, but we need to take control. And I think at the time, it was 24 towns and villages that would come under. The plans were a little bit vague, but as we understand, there would be 2,000 or 3,000 American soldiers that would be in the south as part of this Trump economic zone. The Israelis wanted full control of 14 of those towns and villages, and the ability to come and go pretty much as they please. Now, for the Americans, of course, this is a land rich with resources, and they were. You really think that that's going to be ploughed back into Lebanon? Of course not. This Trump economic zone was backed by the Americans. This is an American plan, named after Trump himself. He's so vain, but it was also to be backed with Gulf money, so money from Qatar and Saudi Arabia in particular. And this Trump economic zone And you'll see again reflected in the latest Israeli exclusion zones, where they issue these orders saying everybody must evacuate this area. But the last one, or one of the last ones, most recent ones, extended out into the sea to the Kana oil field. And of course, we know the Americans, how much they love oil and oil extraction. So the plans kind of converge. So really, the Americans are using Israel as its proxy force to carry out its dirty work, so that it can get its hands on the resources in that area, and of course extend its hegemony and control over not just Lebanon but the region itself. Now, Chris, you'll know, because I know you visited Lebanon, but you'll also know that the United States has this super embassy in just on the outskirts of Lebanon. Huge. It's the second largest embassy anywhere in the world. It's beaten only by the US embassy in Baghdad. Now, again, it doesn't take a genius to work out what that embassy is for, because Lebanon, as we said, has fewer than 6 million people living here, and this embassy isn't really being used to process passports or visas or the such. This is essentially a listening post, or a forward post for US operations in the region. And of course, we have Syria next door, and the United States, of course, played a key role in the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad. Of course, Turkey was heavily involved in that too, but they've installed Jelani in power. Trump has even boasted about this, that we have our man, his handsome boy, I think, as he described Jelani as. So they've managed to kind of be successful there. They've been less successful elsewhere. They're being less successful in Lebanon. They're being less successful in Palestine. They're being less successful, certainly, in Iran, as we know. So this is really a difficult time. And just to touch upon the US involvement in the election the appointment of the president of Lebanon, Joseph Aoun, and Nawaf Salam. Now, people describe them, understandably, as Washington's men in Lebanon. And people may find this very hard to believe, but on the day that Aoun he's the former head of the Lebanese army, when he was appointed president, the Americans were inside the Lebanese parliament when that vote took place. Not only were they inside, they were lobbying for Aoun to be elected. They were holding breakfasts that morning with MPs who they weren't sure which way they were going to vote, that were undecided. So I think it's fair to say that the interference, because they talk about foreign interference in Lebanon a lot, but they talk about, when they say it, they're talking about Iran. But the real foreign interference is openly and brazenly the Americans. All of the plans that we're talking about, the disarmament of Hezbollah, is an American plan. This isn't a Lebanese plan. This is an American plan, and it's so that they can disarm the resistance organizations in order to carry out their plan. The election of Aoun was part of that. But also Nawaf Salam, who is the prime minister. Now, Nawaf Salam, before he was the prime minister of Lebanon, he was the head of the ICJ, the International Court of Justice. And he was removed from that post, of course, when he became the prime minister. Now, this is my take on it. Of course, others may have a different view, but I see this as part of the broader plans, not just for Lebanon, but for the region. So at the time, of course, the ICJ is investigating Israel for war crimes, investigating Netanyahu, Israel Katz, a number of others for war crimes committed in Gaza. And by removing Salam, what they did was they kind of neutralized that, because the person that replaced Salam was the Ugandan judge, the only judge within the ICJ that was voting in favor of Israel. So as the new head of the ICJ, of course, she could play a crucial role in blocking that. from progressing, in blocking these war crimes charges from progressing. Not that I hold any great hope in the International Court of Justice. We know why it was set up. It's another imperialist tool of oppression, but it's part of the plan. Now, Salam was brought in, and one of the first things that Salam did when he became prime minister after settling in was to go move forward with the plans to disarm Hezbollah. And these things don't happen by accident. They happen for a very, very good reason, and that is to support Israel's expansionist policies, but also to project American power in this region.
There's no doubt about that. And Steve, what a tour de force, not only giving us the facts on the ground, but also a real understanding of the ongoing crimes, the war crimes, the crimes, these genocidal crimes that are being committed against the Lebanese people, not only in the south of Lebanon, but throughout the country, but especially in the south. For viewers and listeners out there who don't know, Steve and his cameraman, Ali Rida Sabedi, were targeted in an Israeli airstrike in March. We made a video about it, and we were able to go to the site just last week. I urge everyone to support all of the heroic journalists like Steve and many others, especially the local journalists on the ground. Over 20 have been targeted and killed by the Israeli regime. I think it's 24. Is that right? Am I?
28.
28, sorry, 28.
Yeah.
Pardon me, 28 have been targeted and killed. And many of our colleagues and friends, especially people that Steve knew very well. So please support their work. Please continue to elevate their voices on social media and elsewhere, because it's very, very important that the truth of what's happening in Lebanon gets out. Again, Steve, thank you for all of your hard work. Thank you for your efforts. Our best to you and to Ali Rida on your ongoing work. And we look forward to hopefully having you back on the show. And I look forward to joining you again soon in Lebanon, in the south. Take care, Steve. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on the Mother of All Talk Shows.
Shukran, Habibi. Thank you.
Shukran, Habibi. Of course. Thank you. Appreciate it. Coming up next, we're going to take a break. Your calls are next. Then Gayatri with the social media news roundup. Stay tuned. This is the Mother of All Talk Shows. Perfect.
Tony is in New York on the ceasefire. Go ahead, Tony.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to say that I've been listening to you since the 90s in WBAI. That was also the Mother of All Talkshows.
Are we doing the comments or the
And
it was.
Yes, so I'm 54 now, and I was in my 20s as a political science major at Montclair State University, and I would listen to BAI, and I'm totally enthralled with your perspective, and now even more. So my question is this:
Thank you, brother.
What would Comandante Fidel Castro say about Gaza right now if he was alive?
Well, I'll tell you, I did have a conversation with a dear friend of ours, Alicia Castro, former Argentine ambassador to London, and prior to that, an Argentine MP. Prior to that, the Argentine ambassador to Venezuela. And we talked not about what Fidel would have done. I'll tell you what he did in Southern Africa. He sent 55,000 Cuban volunteer soldiers to go and fight apartheid and smash it, defeat it, fundamentally kill it in Quito, Cuanavale, in the great battle in Angola. And 10,000 Cuban volunteers left their bones in the African soil, which is not irrelevant to the point I'm about to make. Alicia was making the point, she knew Hugo Chavez so very well, that Hugo Chavez would have had a real problem with the last 15 months because he was a man who felt that he had to do things, omnisciency. He felt that he had to be present in such monumentous crises as that. And she thought that Comandante Hugo Chavez definitely would have gone to Gaza he would have put himself in Gaza, in the middle of all this horror, because he would not mentally, psychologically have been able to bear the shame of not doing so, of merely talking from the sidelines, merely condemning. He would have preferred to go there and die there. That's the kind of man that Comandante Hugo Chavez was, and the kind of man that Comandante Fidel Castro was too.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
Welcome back to the Mother of All Talk Shows. This is Chris Helali filling in for George Galloway, who has the night off. Well deserved. Now we're going to go to another call. We have Yassir calling from Quebec, talking about the rising tensions between Israel and Turkey. Yassir, you're on the line. Welcome to the Mother of All Talk Shows.
Thank you, Dr. Helali. Thanks for taking my call. I wanted to talk about this recent flare-up between Turkey and Israel. I wanted your informed input and expert opinion that is it really a genuine flare-up? Is it really a genuine manifestation of tensions possibly leading to an armed conflict between these two countries? Or is it just a facade? There is more to it than meets the eye. And if I could quickly elaborate on my question here, is that, as you know very well, Turkey has been the biggest enabler of the genocide in Gaza. They never shut off the pipeline that brings oil from Baku, Azerbaijan, through Georgia to Turkish port of Ceyhan, BTC pipeline. That ends up supplying 40% of Israel's crude. And in effect, Turkey fueled the genocide. In addition to that, they were making billions in exporting anything from gunpowder to critical minerals to other supplies. So Turkey's hands are red with blood of Palestinians, while all this time, Recep Tayyip Erdogan never ceases to portray himself as a neo-Ottoman emperor and a reincarnation of Salahuddin Ayyubi. In Syria, as you know, they were partners in crime for overthrowing the government of Bashar al-Assad. Turkey and Israel, they collaborated, they cooperated, they planned and executed this entire civil war. And I think it just sounds a bit odd that 45 miles from Turkish border in Abu al-Dohar air base in Idlib province, Israel would have the tenacity or temerity to bomb Turkish interests. It just doesn't quite add up. So I wanted your expert opinion that you think there's more to it than meets the eye.
I want to thank you for that fantastic question, and you outline it brilliantly. I would argue that, look, if Israel and Turkey were on the cusp of war, we would see a break in diplomatic relations and a break in economic relations that you rightfully point out are continuing and expanding to this day. We have the oil that is piped through the pipelines from Azerbaijan to the Eastern Mediterranean that's picked up by Israeli container ships. We have the ongoing sale of commodities to the Israeli regime. And also we have a level of coordination. Let's not forget, Turkey is the second largest NATO army. It is an ally of the United States and a pivotal partner in NATO. It coordinates its intelligence. It hosts U.S. bases on its territory, some of which have nuclear capability. We go back all the way to the Cold War and to the Cuban Missile Crisis, of which part of the agreement was the drawdown of Jupiter missiles, which were placed in Turkey at the time. So I have to emphasize that Turkey is not some multipolar actor 100%. It, of course, has one foot in NATO, one foot it tries to play on the Palestinian cause and on this ongoing multipolar world development in global south, sort of pushback to the global, especially the global northwest. But in any case, what we're seeing is a Turkey that has expanded its role in the region, that has expanded seriously its role in Syria. And a lot of these flare-ups are, I think, more show than they are serious. because if they were serious, we would see a much deeper diplomatic break. But in fact, we're seeing coordination with a lot of the Western powers with Turkey vis-a-vis especially Syria. We've seen just today the integration of the Syrian Democratic Forces, Maslum Abdi signing the agreement with President al-Shara, or Jolani, as he was known in his al-Qaeda days. And we've seen that the US played a pivotal role, as had Turkey, in bringing these two sides together and in ending any sort of separatism that would have affected Turkey. And Turkey, in turn, has also reached a level of agreement with the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK, and the imprisoned leader of the PKK, Abdullah Öcalan, on the island of Imrali, which has been spearheaded by Bahçeli, the leader of the far right in Turkey. So we're seeing a very interesting dynamics at play. Some would argue that the growing alliance between Greece, Cyprus, and Israel is part of a push on Turkey. But listen, Greece and Turkey are both NATO members. Greece, Turkey, Cyprus, and Israel all host US bases, or in the case of Cyprus, British bases. So there is coordination across the board in these countries that are allied with the West, and especially with the NATO war machine. So I cannot imagine any sort of war. And to confirm that, Rutte, the leader of NATO, the Secretary General of NATO, was asked about this exact issue, and he said that he does not foresee any major conflict between Israel and Turkey. And I think that that is all the answer that we need to understand what's really going on behind the scenes and deeper than some of the saber rattling and occasional bombings that go on in Syria. Syria has become the proxy ground for Israel and Turkey, but full-scale war between Israel and Turkey, I don't see it at this point. Thank you so much again for your call, Yasir, and for the fantastic question. Let's go to your comments now. We have Debashi's D1184. They tried to bomb Steve Sweeney. Steve is a hero. He is indeed. And if anybody wants to see more about that, check out my social media and Steve's social media for more about what happened and our visit there just last week for the anniversary, the 5-month anniversary of that bombing. We have a comment from Azari, but not a Turk. Hi, Chris. Nice to see you hosting Moats. Love from Iran. Love to Iran from Moats. We are, of course, in solidarity with the people of Iran, and we love Iran here on Moats. Bob Cosmic. The only straight I want to hear about is when Donald Trump is put in a straight jacket. Well said. Uzi 1mm. I doubt he can hang on through the midterms. He's bollocksed up everything even more than expected. We've got Joe Manchin for Congress. Zionists are not welcome in the Green Party of the United States, and that's why we need a Green Party president in the White House, not someone like Tucker who supported the Zionist gangster Trump. And then we have, lastly, Secretary Bin Face. Tucker's dad is CIA. Let's go to another call. We have on the line Richard in Durham. Would like to congratulate us on a great show. Welcome, Richard.
Hi, Chris. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for standing in for this show. Thank you. Thank you so much for standing in for the show. I didn't know there was going to be a change in presenter, and when I started to watch, I was like, "Oh, it's Chris! Get in! This is going to be brilliant." Thank you. Also, the way that you're presenting is still in the same flavour of the show usually. So well done to you, and thank you again. I think this show is proving to be a platform that's facilitating like-minded people to collaborate together. Unlike many other platforms, the show even welcomes people that have alternative points of view. So I just wanted to say best wishes, health and strength to you, and thank you again, Chris.
Thank you so much, Richard, for your beautiful and very kind words. Wishing you all of the blessings from above, health, happiness, and all the best. And you are indeed right. George Galloway has been an enormous influence on me. I remember writing to him in high school and have been following him and corresponding ever since. And he is one of the finest men and one of the fiercest defenders of justice in the world. And he has brought all of us together. It's really an honor to be on this platform and to be with you all as we continue to fight and build a better world together. Thank you again, Richard, for your kind words. Next, I'm joined by my brother, my comrade, Jackson Hinkle, political analyst, host of Legitimate Targets. Welcome, Jackson, to the Mother of All Talkshows.
Thanks for having me on. You're doing a terrific job, Chris.
Thank you so much, Jackson. Great to see you. I want to start out with asking you sort of your general analysis of where you're seeing things play out, especially vis-a-vis the United States and Iran. You've been at the forefront of speaking about these issues, watching your videos daily, and you've been such an important resource for so many people around the world for important information. What is your perspective? What's your idea of what's happening now vis-a-vis the Trump administration and Iran?
Well, if the goal was initially to stop Iran's nuclear program, I mean, that was one of the 100 things that Trump has either tweeted out or made in an errant remark is he speaking to the press. You know, if that was one of the goals, we just witnessed that President Putin has signed a $25 billion deal with Iran to construct 4 new nuclear power plants in the Islamic Republic, one of which is going to be the largest nuclear power plant that Iran has. So we can say that Trump has failed to that end. As for the Strait of Hormuz reopening, Oman today just announced that they are going to stop working with the United States to allow safe passage for any ships through the Omani route, Omani territorial waters in the Strait of Hormuz. And they have fully solidified this new deal with Iran. So I think by and large, this has been a complete failure. Netanyahu did come out and give a speech today that I found a little bit interesting. In it, he said that I presented Trump with option 3 when I was with him in D.C. Option 3 being this economic D-Day, if you will. That's what they're referring to it as. If D is for disaster, I think that'd be appropriate because China, I think, who would be the largest target of secondary sanctions on Iran, has said that they simply don't care what Trump is talking about and threatening. They're going to continue doing business with Iran. But Netanyahu, in the speech, he said option 3 was this economic war, which means that there's 2 options he'd prefer a little bit more. I think continued strikes, ground invasion, these sorts of things. And regardless of the fact that Iran is winning, I do think that they are stupid enough to pursue those first 2 options at some point in the near future.
I think you're spot on. And I think that what we're seeing Scott Bessent basically laundering this sort of massive economic warfare that they're going to unleash on the Islamic Republic. But as you rightfully point out, China doesn't look like it's budging. A lot of other countries in the global south don't look like they're going to budge. And they won't cave to secondary sanctions because that would be a de facto victory for the U.S.'s illegal economic coercive actions against the Islamic Republic, which, by the way, they too are also impacted. We've seen tariffs. We've seen economic warfare. Russia has over 20,000 sanctions against it right now and increasing day by day. When the Congress gets, in a tizzy, they end up putting more sanctions, even though they keep talking about peace in the Trump administration. So I think that you are spot on that. Let me ask you, what do you see vis-a-vis the much larger and broader situation? We were just talking to Steve Sweeney about South Lebanon. We're seeing constant and daily bombardments in Gaza, which is a continuation of the genocide. Even though there is a ceasefire, it's not worth the paper that it's written on. What are you seeing in terms of the broader regional conflict? And also Yemen, of which we both visited, is targeting very effectively these Saudi-backed rebels and these forces that are trying to dislodge the popular revolutionary government that's in Sana'a.
Well, I mean, if you and I could see these things coming from a million miles away, I mean, we saw these developments back in January at the start of the year. And I think most astute observers would have seen these things coming. We can only assume that Iran has seen this vision for generations, and they're very happy with how everything looks right now, despite the fact that, of course, aggression continues against them, against Gaza, against Lebanon, and against Yemen. We can see who is the clear victor at this stage of the war. Now, it's not all over until the fat lady sings, as they say, but when we look at Lebanon, I mean, Lebanon's been in way worse positions than before, way worse positions, as we all know. And I just finished reading Sheikh Qasim Naim's book, The Story from Within. And he's the leader of the Lebanese resistance. And the book is talking about the 80s, the 90s in Lebanon, the early 2000s, and all the various struggles and how far Israel is able to push into Lebanon, all the way toward Beirut. So I look at that and I say, dang, they've occupied so much of Lebanon in particular in the past, and it's really just not sustainable. It's not sustainable when the people who live there, their land, they don't want you there. They can make life very difficult for you. They can make life for these occupiers and whatever sort of collaborators very difficult. And right now, they don't even have meaningful collaborators on the ground in Lebanon, especially in the south. So I look at this and I say that I don't see where this road is leading if you're the Zionist entity. And that's kind of been what we've all been saying for the longest time. And now Netanyahu is scrambling to try and put together some coalition where there would be a shared ministerial role where he would be prime minister for a portion of the term, and he would then share the prime minister position with another coalition partner for the duration of the term. This is not a good look for Netanyahu. If you're winning a war and supposedly it's going so well, you shouldn't be losing elections. And we see that in Israel, and we all know that's why Zelensky won't have elections in Ukraine either.
Hey, you're spot on. Speaking of the broader region, I want to ask you, what do you see happening vis-a-vis Ukraine, Russia? Let's move our eye a little bit north to Eastern Europe, right? And the Black Sea. We're seeing the Black Sea as a major hotspot now. And Russia has basically stopped all ship traffic to Odessa. What are you seeing in terms of the developments in the ongoing NATO war against the Russian Federation and Russia's special military operation in the Donbass?
It seems that Russia may have taken a little bit of inspiration from the IRGC SEPA Navy and their shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz. I don't know, but we actually do have a video where President Putin was speaking maybe a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, where he was actually praising the Iranian shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz, those who were trying to illegally cross those waters, and saying that, we need to look at this. We need to look at this in regards to what we've got going on in the Black Sea. And a lot of people ask that question, why was this not done a long time ago? Who knows, right? There's a million questions that could be asked about every conflict. We're not in these situation rooms, so we have no idea. But regardless, it's proven to be quite effective, this Russian shutdown of Ukrainian ports. And it seems as though the world has not fallen apart. The sky has not come crashing down upon us in the midst of this shutdown of Ukrainian shipping and Ukrainian ports. And, well, we saw that Ratcliffe, CIA Director Ratcliffe, came to Moscow yesterday. I don't know if he had enough time in that 5-minute meeting he had in Moscow to even utter a single word about the shutdown of these ports, but I would imagine that he couldn't be too happy about how things are looking for Ukraine right now. And the ports, the shipping is a really big part of it, and it has proven to be just effective for the Russians as it has been for the Iranians.
I think you're spot on, and I think that what we're seeing is now the Ukrainians opened Pandora's box by attacking Wildberries and all of these logistics centers, warehouses, and civilian infrastructure, and Russia has responded in kind, targeting the logistics and infrastructure in Ukraine, and we're seeing a near collapse of some of the logistics that are needed to keep Ukraine afloat. Let me ask you now, you have been alongside me, the target of a vicious campaign in the United States, spearheaded by the Israel firster Randy Fine and Max Miller. And we've seen that they've called for stripping us of U.S. citizenship, stripping us of our passports, basically making us out to be traitors and IRGC agents and calling for our execution. What do you make of what's happening in the U.S. vis-a-vis this letter, the calls in Congress, especially against you for the time that you and I spent in Iran during the funeral of Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, and also some of the support that you've now received? We saw a video recently from Anna Kasparian. Talk to us a little bit about what's going on in the U.S. and some of the pushback just for reporting the truth on the ground in Iran.
Yeah, you'd think that someone would be charged with treason or have their passport revoked or be charged with some sort of a felony if they were a sitting member of Congress and taking money from a foreign government and then using that money as a bribe to then go and cheerlead genocide in Gaza and the nuking of Iran. You'd think that would be like the qualifying threshold for someone to be charged with treason. But instead, we are the targets of that because we're reporting the truth. Just like George Galloway and his home country, he has become a target as well. And I guess that we're not going to get a pat on the back for saying the truth. We're not going to get a pat, and no one should expect that. But I'm just sitting idly by, and I'm watching the whole U.S. empire collapse. So I'm kind of just like, regardless of whether or not I can enter the U.S. right now, I mean, that's kind of beside the point. I don't know if I want to be in the United States right now. I have to dodge homeless people with knives who want to kill me on the streets. And then if I do manage to get to sit down at a nice restaurant and enjoy a big steak dinner, I'm probably going to die from that Argentinian beef that they're importing to the United States. And then if I happen to write a nasty thing about Benjamin Netanyahu on Twitter, I might find myself jobless and alongside those other homeless people on the street. So the United States, not really a good place to be right now. At least they have the dollar, right? The power, the almighty power of the dollar. But oh wait, Scott Bessent, a very interesting man who he and his husband have adopted 2 young little boys. They're, happily married couple, of course. They are now saying that they're going to strip the dollar from countries all across the world. They're going to de-dollarize the entire world if any countries continue to support Iran. What that means, I don't know. I can tell you it definitely means one thing: disaster for the U.S. economy, disaster for U.S. hegemonic control of the world if they actually go through with this. But yeah, I appreciated what Anna Kasparian had to say. What a world, right? It wasn't too long ago that she had me banned on Twitter, and she was a big cheerleader for Ukraine. And while there's other disagreements that I'm sure that we still do have, but she is mature enough, she is wise enough, and she's really brilliant, very aggressive and in a terrific way on the question of Israel and Zionist control of our government, to say that, look, we may disagree on some things, but we need to focus on the number one issue facing America right now and really the world, and that's Zionist aggression and the theft of America's sovereignty. So I welcome that, and I hope that other people like Hassan Piker, who is very viral online, I hope that he takes a note out of the book of Anna Kasparian and can appreciate just how powerful it is to unite and build these bridges across different political backgrounds, because that's exactly what we... Could you imagine, Chris, if Hassan Piker and Candace Owens were sitting down for a conversation? Ben Shapiro would lose his mind. The whole world would collapse, right? That's what we need more of right now, not division.
I agree 100%. I agree. And I think that I gotta plug here. I think that Palestine has been a major awakening for a lot of people, especially since October 7th. And the genocide that we've seen has, number one, revealed the true nature of the Zionist regime. And number two, has revealed that the only way to have peace in Palestine is a one-state solution from the river to the sea, no apartheid, no occupation, full rights for all people, the right of return, and equality amongst everyone. So people are now calling out Jewish supremacy, which has been enshrined in Israeli law, and basically saying if there is to be justice, and if you really want to be a quote-unquote democracy, You can't have this system. This system has got to go. Zionism has got to go. And the Iranians are calling for that. The free people of the world are calling for that. The Palestinians themselves are crying out for justice. And you're seeing it unfolding. You're seeing people changing before our very eyes. You and I have seen it over the past 4 years or so. It has been quite remarkable to see. Let me ask you, what are you seeing on the ground in the U.S.? We've got a midterm election coming up in November. What is happening amongst the U.S. population? They're seeing the impact of the war and the Strait of Hormuz's closure on gas prices, on commodities, on travel, on other key goods and services that they need to pay for. What are Americans saying, and what do you think the midterms are going to hold for the future of the Republican Party under President Trump and the U.S. going forward?
I think if there's one phrase that probably symbolizes the state of America the most right now, it's a phrase I keep seeing all over the place. It's a phrase you and I both know very well, and we've said it before. But now I'm seeing like people who had, lifelong careers in the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or media apparatus, all saying the same thing right now. We can't vote ourselves out of this. We will never be able to vote ourselves out of this mess. And that's just the truth. You get these, I think, Jimmy Dore years ago, he tried to work some magic with the Justice Democrats and get people into Congress that had no corporate PAC money. And he was the first person to interview AOC. AOC's first interview was with Jimmy Dore. A lot of people don't know that. And as soon as he started to smell that something was rotten with AOC and the squad and fraud squad as we now know them, he said, okay, I'm gonna call you out. Others were not so quick, but now everyone sees what's going on. As we mentioned earlier, Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian, they're calling it all out now. And I think that the only, on the Republican side, there's no hope. Thomas Massey's out. Marjorie Taylor Greene is out. Who do we have left there? We have no one. On the Democratic side, there's some people that sound and in some cases look a whole lot like the fraud squad that are trying to enter the Senate and the House of Representatives. And they said a whole lot of nice things during the primary races for the Democratic primary races. Some things that were not so nice that went underreported. But George Galloway never misses. He always called them out when they said some things that were not so nice. And now that the primary's over and some of these people won their races, they're going out and doing the dirty work of Israel already. It's been like 2 weeks. And these people like Abdul El-Sayed is going out and cowering in fear before the Zionist lobby. So I have zero hope whatsoever in these people. And I do think it's only going to further this rift that the entire American public seems to have with the political process at this point.
I think you're spot on, and we saw even the recent campaign of Dan Bilzerian fighting against Randy Fine. That clearly there was an upsurge of support around the country for Dan. And yes, well,
sure, what happened to his votes?
What happened to his votes? A lot of votes went missing.
He just disappeared. So the disappearing, what do they call it? The magic bullet, and Dan Bilzerian has the magic disappearing votes. What the hell was that? I don't know.
Well, I don't know either. I think there should be an investigation. I think that there was some rigging involved and some stealing of votes, no doubt about it. So I think Dan Bilzerian has a future career in store because he was at the forefront and he's still a fighter, no doubt about it. Let me ask you, what do you make of Trump's overture to Kim Jong-un now? Out of nowhere, Trump is now posting about Kim Jong-un all day, every day. He's posting pictures of himself from the past. He's talking about the great leader, how he's drawn down some of the exercises that the U.S. is doing in South Korea. What do you make of this rekindle the romance of sort between Trump and, of course, Kim Jong-un has not responded. So it's just a one-way street at this point. But what do you make of it?
Well, Kim Jong-un did respond a little bit because Trump, in his first statement to the press about his comments on North Korea, when he said that yes, Kim Jong-un has responded to me. We did talk a little bit. The next day, we saw North Korea launch several ballistic missiles into the sea, which put up some red warning signs in Japan as a result. So I think that was Kim Jong-un's way of responding, maybe. But, this is something that I said every January 1st, I do a prediction video for the year. And my prediction for the Korean Peninsula was that you have this new leader in South Korea, which, it went very underreported, but KJ No was talking about it, who's also a guest on this show, George Galloway's show. And this new South Korean leader was not really as much of a U.S. puppet as previous leaders of South Korea. And as soon as he got elected, he was talking about, ending these cross-border provocations, that they would blast South Korean K-pop music across the border into the DPRK, these sorts of weird things. There was other statements that the South Korean president put out, the new leader. He was talking that there needs to be peace and dialogue, and, we need to officially end this war. And I really think it's as simple as Trump cannot control this guy. And when Trump called upon South Korea to come in and assist in Iran, the South Korean leader said no. And then Trump said, we need South Korea to send interceptor missiles to Ukraine. And South Korea said no. So then Trump said, okay, well, we're going to remove our U.S. military drills in South Korea. And they were like, okay. And then now you got all these crazy tweets about Trump and Kim Jong-un. And I'm sure the South Koreans are just looking at this saying like, all right, this seems like we're on the path to peace, exactly what we talked about when we, took this government. So I think it's all good. And I can only hope that Trump will remove this ban on U.S. passport holders entering into North Korea, because Trump instituted that, I think, back in 2016 or 17. He put a ban on anyone with a U.S. passport from going into North Korea on that passport. And I've never been to North Korea. That's the reason why I would love to go. And I know you tell me great things, and maybe we can both go together very soon. We'll see.
Inshallah, as they say. I look forward to it. Jackson Hinkle, the great American commentator, journalist, host of Legitimate Targets. Always a pleasure, brother. Thank you so much for coming on the Mother of All Talk Shows. Look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.
Thank you very much. You as well.
Thank you, brother. All right, everybody. Another thank you to more of tonight's top Moats supporters. Frank Grant, Nat Johnson, Lisa Roddy, John Nahu, and Heather Liardet. Your support through Moats.tv is greatly appreciated and helps keep the program on air. To support the show, visit Moats.tv and click the Donate Now button. You can give whatever you can afford in any currency. One-off donations are more than welcome, and recurring support helps keep Moats going week after week. You can also download the Moats podcast right now by scanning the QR code we're going to put here on your screen. You can also listen to the weekly podcast at Moats.tv. Once you've listened, please don't forget to rate and review the podcast. It helps more people discover Moats and keeps the show growing around the world. This week, the podcast is in the top 10 for politics in Gambia, Montenegro, Nigeria, and, most interestingly, in the UAE. And in the top 30 for politics in Pakistan, Estonia, Russia, and South Africa. Thank you to everyone who watches, listens, subscribes, and shares the program. Your continued support helps Moats reach new audiences around the world every week. It's been a real pleasure and an honor to fill in for the one and only, the great George Galloway, who's off for tonight. I hope to join him again soon. Phenomenal man. Please, again, support the show. And I thank you all again for all that you've done, for all your support and love. Continue to support Moats. Continue to support all the great work that we do here. Thank you all again. Take care. Have a wonderful night. stay well, and we'll see you soon on Moats. All the best.